Now, I'd like to introduce David Guthrie and Mark Lowe from KPMG. David Guthrie is the national leader for agribusiness and for KPMG across Canada, serving clients in food value chain from primary production, further processing, and food distribution. David is also able to access global resources and thought leadership from KPMG's Canadian clients and bring forward these experiences to the KPMG Global Network. David was the director of the BC Food and Beverage Association for 6 years, where for 3 years he was the treasurer. David's goals for his clients is to help their businesses better and be better prepared for the challenges in the future. Mark Lowe is the ignition leader at KPMG for Vancouver. Mark helps clients imagine, design, and build their future in a rapidly evolving competitive landscape. His decade of cross-industry consulting experience spans financial services, retail, energy sectors, and more. His focus on user-centered design principles help abstract concepts like exponential technology come alive for their clients and makes them real, actionable, and impactful in ways that drives measurable results. As the Greater Vancouver area lead for Ignition, Mark leads a team whose sole focus to help local companies become more dynamic, more competitive, and more sustainable. Gentlemen.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction, Joseph. So Mark's got the task of loading up our presentation and being in control of that. So appreciate the introduction, and it was great on our time together at the BC Food and Beverage. You could say that you taught me everything, and then when I took over succeeded you as the treasurer, I blamed all the errors and things that went wrong on you, just so you know, as well as someone taking on a new role should do. So wanted to thank the CPMA for allowing us to present today. I know Joseph and I ran through this presentation. It's really coming forward with some really thought-provoking topics to really, prepare businesses for the future here. So, this agricultural revolution is upon us. It's happening today, and there's going to be a lot of disruption, whether you're in the beginning part of the food value chain as a primary producer, you're in further processing, or food disruption. So we're going to jump into the presentation here. Mark, if you want to jump to the next slide. So as Joseph has introduced us there, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to talk about our 20 predictions.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. And lovely to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I wanted to start the presentation with a short video that I'll let play in the background, just to provide some context around what we mean when we say make exponential technology and disruption real for clients. So what you're seeing is a port that sits just outside of Shanghai, China. 2 million square kilometers, 2 million square meters rather, of surface area, 2 kilometers of coastline, and it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, fully autonomously without a single human intervening. It's offloading over 6 million containers a year, and being able to leverage automation, 5G connectivity, sensor technology, data streams, and so on. It's reducing operating costs by over 70% and increasing efficiency by over 50%. Now, when we talk to clients about the impact of technology, this is a fantastic example of how these different technologies converge to actually unlock new sources of value and to actually fundamentally change the way business gets done. And one of the reasons that I was so excited to join you today was that your industry, the agriculture industry, is going to be experiencing the same types of disruptions and also opportunities. And so part of what we try to do with the 20 predictions is to make these abstract concepts very real and practical at an industry level, to make them accessible and to help clients unlock where those opportunities may lie. Within KPMG, what we do to actually pull these 20 predictions together is that we survey business leaders, economists, and also do, of course, our own research to layer these concepts together, and then we span those out across the various technology stacks. And what we've done today is to make that very, very specific for the agriculture sector. where is it? That's my slide one. There we go. And so what we want to focus on today are 4 key areas out of those 20. The first is food production. So that's fundamentally how we process food, how we grow it, and how we manage that food waste. The supply chain issues that are coming on stream. So not only how you get the product to customers, but how you leverage things like tracking and trace. The customer experience, so how you actually interact with your customers, both in terms of the environmental, social, and governance issues that are becoming ever more prevalent in business, and also issues again like food traceability. And finally, the workplace. So trends like automation and employee demands, and how do you make those concepts and talking points very real and practical for your industry. So it's going to be an exciting talk. We're very pleased to be with you today, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to David, and we're going to jump into our first area.
Great, thanks, Mark. So yeah, again, these are all predictions of things we're going to see in kind of 20 years. And as Mark has shown in kind of the video there, a lot of the the technologies and things we'll be talking about are already in play in certain industry sectors. So in some ways, it's not too far of a leap that we're going to be talking about here, but it does provide a good perspective of just the different way of thinking and be prepared for what is coming down the road and what will be mainstream. So jumping into our predictions here. So the first one is we'll produce and eat food in a whole new way. So this really comes down to, looking at, where our food is produced and, how it is grown. So a great example of this is just thinking about, the rise of indoor and vertical farming and being able to grow a product anywhere in the world. So just imagine, instead of having strawberries trucked up from Mexico, they could be grown in downtown Toronto in a spare office building with an indoor growing facility. And, strawberries from Toronto could be feeding us year round. We'll also be looking at alternate proteins. So whether that's insects as our protein source or other, non-meat proteins as sources of our protein needs in the future. Agricultural producers will also be leveraging new technologies like IoT, the Internet of Things, allowing producers to better, understand the supply and demand needs, increasing yields so we can get more product off of what, the current land base that we're growing today. And ultimately, looking to reduce waste as well. So we've got combination of drones, artificial intelligence, edge computing. There's going to be a lot more data that's going to be drawn to really, help the producers of the future just be more efficient and effective in what they're growing and looking at new ways of growing and different locations. So that's just a kind of the taste per se of our first prediction. The second one deals with the circular economy coming to age, moving to a restorative process of production and looking for opportunities with food waste. So food waste, we'll be looking to recycling food waste on a larger scale to move everything from opportunities for composting to, whether it's animal feed or, creating new products from food waste. We're also going to see a revolution in bioplastics and biofuels, making other products from natural resources or vegetable starches, which will help lower emissions as well. Innovation will also allow us to produce goods without depleting our natural resources. People will feel the increasing empowerment of this economic model as they'll see products coming through the system and recycling back into the system, driving a higher participation of and increasing the economic value through that process and recycling. So Mark, on to the next one.
Forwarding, I apologize. There we go.
Yeah. So now we get into some exciting technologies, what we're seeing today. So the rise of the driverless vehicle and autonomous vehicles. And it's not just even thinking of like drones per se, but autonomous vehicles, they're going to be everywhere. We're not going to be dependent on fossil fuels. We'll be looking at other sources to power these vehicles as well. The impact of these autonomous vehicles will also be we'll see within our infrastructure. Looking at roads designed specifically for autonomous vehicles. And in the video that Mark showed there, seeing the transport trucks per se, driving around the facility, and it's all designed for these autonomous vehicles. Within the cities, that's going to change traffic flows, reducing demand for parking and cutting down emissions as well. Even things thinking about the corridors that we traditionally have. So on the West Coast from Mexico, California, up to Seattle to Vancouver, think about just even having like a dedicated highway just to transport goods, all just using autonomous vehicles. So really cool to see how this is going to play out in terms of the distribution and also dealing with some of the potential challenges of supply chain. So interesting to see how that one comes through. The next prediction is everything will be connected to the internet. Sensors are basically going to be everywhere, even under your skin. So this is a really interesting one to think about as we get into this realm of looking at how we use sensors today and how we'll use sensors in the future. So looking at from a health perspective, the ability to capture real-time health-related data is sent to your fridge to recommend what foods you should be eating. Your fridge will also be, placing grocery orders for you, and potentially even retailers gathering that data so that these grocery orders, can be placed in real time. And if you take that step back through to distribution, if you as the distributor are getting these orders, you've got bots in your warehouse already starting to move goods around the warehouse to get ready for delivery, to get ready for that end customer at the very end of the day. So looking through that whole everything being connected, are these robots in your warehouse today going to be really delivering the end goods to your customer, and even before the customer knows what they actually need to buy. And a lot of this IoT it's going to create autonomous and self-governed interactions between systems, sensors, and other devices to support our day-to-day activities. Cities will also be smart, making our lives as residents better, and will be carbon neutral, running on clean energy systems such as solar farms and circular economies to reduce consumption. So this one is going to be really exciting to see, how this one comes through in the future. I guess in this one, shopping will be done from the comfort of your home, as a lot of us have experienced over the last couple of years. Shopping from home is here. It's here to stay, but it's going to be continue to evolve as well. So retailers will be using artificial intelligence and machine learning to deliver these personalized moments to consumers to enhance the shopping experience and brand loyalty. The traditional bricks and mortar stores are going to become phygital. And what we mean by that is a physical presence or a physical location enhanced with digital technologies. So as you can see kind of in the image here, sitting at a coffee bar and you've got an augmented reality or virtual reality shopping experience in front of you. There's also now the use of drones, and large retailers having their own fleet of drones. And if you're a smaller retailer, getting a third-party service provider to do your drone delivery, and looking at drones as a way to provide faster delivery of goods, and really trying to help keep the cost of delivery down. Drones is also going to make it easier for retailers to reach their customers in remote locations. You're really looking to expand your customer base. And I think for the people on the call here to think about is you as in the distribution business, what is that future retailer going to be? And maybe you are that retailer and you've got your own fleet of drones delivering your product direct to the end consumer versus going through the traditional retail chain. So interesting to see how that one comes to play as well. Wellness is going to be changing our lives, linking food to health. So we're already seeing advances in technology to gather data. So even little things today like your smartwatch, tracking your heart rate, things like that. Other smart sensors and connected devices will be tracking your health and then linking it into artificial intelligence to track other biometrics and data to help improve our lives and our lifespan. Also be looking at micro personalized precision medicine will be very common in 20 years. So really having, gathering all these data points in to help, doctors and health professionals recommend very specific medical approaches to solving your health problems. And then these, other tools such as AI and other devices, really guiding those decisions with your doctor about, healthier lifestyle, the food that you should be eating, even thinking about linking your specific DNA to what foods you should be consuming or avoiding. And, big picture thinking on this one is can we solve our health problems with food versus traditional medicines? Then we get into your coworkers. Your future coworkers are going to be bots. So this is, taking the traditional repetitive tasks and replacing it, with replacing the human component with robotics. So again, go back to the video that Mark showed there with the autonomous drivers and autonomous vehicles. Same thing for a lot of the tasks that are done today where you would require, a human to do it. It'll be done by a bot in the future. And that's really going to be, easy one is to replace, again, those lower skill jobs that you may have challenges finding labor to actually do. But it's also going to make the traditional jobs that we would be doing more efficient for us because we'll be leveraging the technologies and the robotics to actually complete those tasks as well. And then we get into the future workplace. So we're living in an era of hybrid work right now, but this is going to take a couple steps even further. So to begin with, using things like augmented reality and virtual reality in the workplace to help deliver training or other benefits to your workforce. From an employer perspective, employers are going to have to be transparent about their broader strategy and social purpose. And employees will get a say in kind of the workplace culture and strategic direction of the organization. Companies are going to have to be innovative and be agile in order to be competitive. And companies will be, assembling teams based on appropriate skills and experiences to solve specific problems. So what that means is really looking at ultra flexible work arrangements. So you can have people come in for specific tasks and complete them, and then they might not be used for a while, but you'll be pulling people in from various, for various tasks in and out, and just being flexible when people can work, where they want to work, and how they're going to be doing their work. And I'll come back to here on purpose. So again, a lot of the the drive of corporations will be driven, and the purpose will be driven by the employees. So one of the things, like the World Economic Forum providing a set of ethical principles to guide companies, paying fair pay, fair amount of taxes getting paid, zero tolerance for corruption, upholding human rights, and providing transparency in the supply chains throughout the organization. Environmental concerns will also be a key item for employees, and they want to see that their corporate employers are following through on their commitment to the environment and ESG. And really successful companies in 2040 will have long-term thinking that will have long-term thinking as opposed to an eye for the short term. So really looking longer term versus short-term gains and profits. So really thinking long-term, thinking about the employees and their interactions. The last prediction here is all about climate change and timelines. So again, society, scientists, and governments will be working together to entrench regulations that make solving climate change truly actionable rather than a hope for income. From a technology play, the use of AI and other tools will help, identify where there's climate challenges or pollution a lot quicker than what we're experiencing today. Organizations will move towards recycling, embracing renewable sources, and work to dramatically reduce the carbon footprint of their end-to-end processes and outputs. So again, climate change is upon us today. We're seeing a lot of challenges, and it's really will be enhanced and become, even greater of a need for us to address in the future. So in terms of, where KPMG comes into play on this one, again, thinking of accountants and, larger firms who are more than just like audits, financial statements, and tax returns. It's really looking at, the supply chain for us and the advisory piece of that, looking at ESG and, how we're incorporating ESG in everything that we do and helping our clients work through their ESG commitments. And a focus on innovation and our innovation labs. Mark leads our Ignition Center in Vancouver, and that's kind of our focus there, is to really bring these technologies to everyone in terms of realizing what is the potential with technology today and in the future. ESG is a topic on top of everyone's mind right now, and especially if you are looking to differentiate yourself in the market. ESG is something that's going to be should be top of mind, and we continue to see a lot of companies come out with ESG commitments, carbon neutral statements, things like that. And then supply chain, lots of challenges we've seen in current environments with supply chain, but again, there's other factors with respect to the supply chain and the challenges that we're seeing that we can go through and help diagnose and identify where there's areas of potential improvement. So I think we're now at the question period here. So.
Okay. Yeah, please, if you have any questions, kindly enter them in the chat area, as I'd mentioned earlier. I guess as a first question, I'd pass this out to David and Mark. Other than the current events that we've been faced with, keeping those in mind, what do you see as the most significant challenge with supply chains into the future?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start off with this one, Mark, and then go with your thoughts there. So, I think the biggest challenge with your supply chain is going to be the transparency within your supply chain and the traceability component of it. So it's not, just building resiliency within your supply chain, but knowing that the end consumer wants to know where the product came from, where did it go, how was it processed. So that traceability component, but also that transparency that someone can look through, from the retail and look all the way back to where the origins of that product came from and know that it was produced in a safe manner. There's, the labeling is consistent with what we're seeing from the processing side of it. So I think that's, from my perspective, those are some of the big areas of concern there.
Thank you. And Mark, anything you can add?
Yeah, I think David's hit it bang on the head. The big shift is away from sort of centralized sources of truth, where an organization, for example, would be responsible for verifying that provenance, and really creating a much more sort of decentralized view where you can be in the grocery store scanning a QR code and understanding the full end-to-end literal farm to table journey of that produce or product, with other organizations playing a part, or validations being done along the way, that consumers will have will be relying on to get that information from. So it's a fundamental shift of the business model that's enabled by the technology, and will be increasingly accessible by your end users, and will be demanded by your end users, which is again a sort of fundamental shift in user behavior and expectation.
So Mark, just on that vein, what role do you see blockchain play in the supply chain?
The blockchain, all the buzzwords. So for the folks on the call who maybe are not as familiar with blockchain, just to sort of level set in terms of knowledge and nomenclature, the idea of a blockchain is a decentralized database that is a unified source of truth, and that could be anything from you'll hear Bitcoin in the news, which is a financial transaction, so it's the ability for two individuals to interact financially and have a shared view of that transaction and that shared ledger. And then if you take that same concept and apply it to the produce sector, that's the idea that as you create timestamps or markers for that produce's journey from the field to the grocery store to the table, that using a blockchain to validate each one of those transactions would mean that you don't need a centralized third party to act as that source of truth. That in fact anybody can look at the blockchain, see that those transactions are there. We agree as a consortium that those transactions are true and valid, and therefore I can, as an end user, I can have comfort in the provenance of that product. So it's a funny concept to sort of wrap one's head around in terms of what it means. But it again is really about technology enabling different business models and allowing different players to come to the table, where as I previously it was really around centralized kind of command and control structures that would create that provenance. That ability to do that, and the ability to have to be able to see that process will be distributed and accessible to people by virtue of the technology that sits underneath it.
So for example, in the produce industry, we have something called the Blue Book, and the Blue Book is where a lot of purchasers and intermediaries or suppliers and distributors are checking up on each other, especially if they're fairly new to one another. So is this blockchain could be like a virtual Blue Book that you don't even need to go and search the Blue Book or anything or do it's just automatically bang, it's there, so that you have the speed of new introduction of relationships.
Exactly right, and not in a way that not in a way that creates chaos, right? So we can manage again who has access to that, or how you interact with that ecosystem, but it's the ability to be able to set those permissions in a way that if you want your end users to be able to see, who is in that technology enabled version of the blue book that you're describing, that they would be able to do that. And again, it would be the access to that information, and the players in that ecosystem would be more distributed than they've ever been before.
Yeah, and if you think of it like kind of like an ecosystem of everyone contributing to it. So if you have like a certifier providing information into it, and you've got producers providing input in. So like, think of it like a big ecosystem, but it's got that platform to pull it all together.
So many organizations are facing shortages of labor. At what point do organizations switch to bots or automation?
Yeah, and great question. And I think this is one that's, unique to every organization. And even when I talk to clients, like, even the price of, if they can even find labor, the price of labor is just going up and up. So, I think what we'll start to see is, it's like with any new technology, there's the early adopters, and then there's the fast followers. So as new technologies, like even things like robotic arms, as more businesses start to adopt it, you'll start to see the real fast following of think of it like going to a local car dealership. It'd be just running down the street to grab a new robotic arm to fulfill a task. It'll just be like that common. So every organization will be different when they reach that point of like, hopefully it's not before we realize like, well, no one's showing up today to actually do it, we need to stop production, but realize before that happens that they can actually make these changes for the benefit before they get to that point of like, they just have to stop production. Mark, I'm not sure if you have any comments to add on that one.
Only to add that the part that's difficult to wrap one's head around, I find, is that the exponential nature of the technology means that the access becomes ubiquitous by virtue of a rapidly dropping price. So if you think of another analogy, so the idea of genomic sequencing, which 15 or 20 years ago would have cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to map your genome, 23andMe will do that now for like on the order of, I think it's around $100, right? And that's because the technology has become democratized effectively, and companies are coming in and able to provide that service at an increasing, exponentially decreasing price. The same thing will happen with robotics, is that things that seemed like edge cases will become much more mainstream, much quicker, and you'll start to map that price as Dave is describing, right? The sort of intersection on your price graph of the price of robotic intervention as against manual labor, and it's coming faster than we think. I think David's point is bang on, that it will be around edge cases to start, and then those value. The value will be shown, and you'll be able to extend further and further into more and more stuff. One example that we use in our Ignition Center, so the virtual background you see behind us is our Ignition Center, where we bring clients to do these workshops, to understand some of the impacts of technology. We've got an exhibit there with a local company that uses computer vision and machine learning to look at indoor crops of vertical farms for pest control. And so all the robot does all day long is it goes up and down, up and down, up and down the vertical farm, and it's looking to identify pests earlier. So instead of having to spray the entire place with pesticide, that machine is actually performing that function. And there's still a human intervening to then to identify the issue and fix it. But you've got a machine that's just all they do all day long is tend to the crop effectively. So it's those types of examples which will sort of permeate further and further into operations. And and part of what we do is just help clients understand where those initial use cases are, where it's valuable, and then how to build a roadmap if that's a journey that clients want to go on.
Okay, so Mark, I got a question here from that's actually specific to the vertical farms. So you mentioned about vertical farms will be taking over. However, there's significant costs operating vertical farms versus conventional farms. The person who's posting this is saying they happen to have a vertical farm and greenhouse, so they appreciate some of the issues. How will we ever be able to compete with traditional farmers that do not have the same costs, such as electricity, warehousing, that in cities this is a premium. Additional farmers are also adopting robotics and other levels of adaptation to improve upon what they do in terms of yields and lowering costs. So the question is, how do you feel these modern vertical farms will replace existing farms?
Uh-huh. So my 2 cents here is that, first of all, I don't believe that vertical farms will replace, but I think they have a very valuable role in augmenting augmenting production. But I think we're at a very interesting inflection point. So that this is when David asked if I'd be interested in joining him here. That's one of the things that got me so excited. Is the industry is at such an interesting point. Traditional farmers are going to be increasingly challenged around issues of climate and changing climate. So I don't think necessarily that the jury's 100% out in terms of consistency of yield in traditional farming. And I think vertical farming will have a significant role to play there. And then similar to the robotics discussion, where vertical farms, and I'm probably, for the folks on the call that are in the game, I'm probably taking your watch and telling you the time. But in terms of being able to produce closer to the end consumer in areas of high density, right? So we've got a rapidly shifting evolution in the way that real estate is being used. You've had this very quick transition in the last number of years around work from home. I'll tell you a personal example with KPMG. So, we're in the midst of trying to understand how many folks need to come back to the office and how many folks are going to permanently work from home, and this will be their commute is straight into the camera. So as those models shift and the use of real estate changes in urban centers, things like urban farming, will become increasingly available because there will be space that was, more, it will become unlocked, and the shortening of the travel distance from farm to table is going to become increasingly important. So I think, in those dense urban centers, that's where we'll see significant impact to start, and then the rest will play out as the economics drive the cost and value for traditional farming versus vertical farming. Anyway, David.
Yeah, and I think my perspective on this is exactly what you're talking about. I think vertical farming is not going to replace the traditional farming, but it will fulfill that niche. And I think for those on the West Coast here who experienced, whether it was the wildfires or the floods, and all of a sudden the infrastructure of the inability to get food to your consumer, or particularly in BC, like from getting raw milk from the farms in the interior delivered down to Vancouver for processing. Well, that just wasn't possible. So you started this thought about well, do we actually produce food closer to where the urban centers are? And again, it's not going to feed the whole city, but at least you're getting a closer connection. So I think where you need to get closer to the people, that's where there's that opportunity for vertical farming or indoor growing will fulfill that little niche spot there. We're still going to get our strawberries from Mexico trucked up, or other product from California, things like that. But there is definitely a niche there for vertical farming.
One other example that might be interesting is we were approached as KPMG. We were approached by a company locally, which was an offspring of Impark. So when COVID hit and everybody went home and was working from home, of course, Impark's business fell off a cliff. And so one of the startups that they spawned in an attempt to pivot was to repurpose parking garages into vertical farms. And so just as an example of repurposing space, I think you'll see those models start to shift. And as David's describing, as you're looking at it closer to your end consumer, that's where you'll see some really interesting evolution. So, as always, driven by venture capital money, and some some of those models will survive and thrive, and others will not. But it'll be a very rapidly evolving space.
Thank you very much, David Guthrie, Mark Lowe. Much appreciate the presentation today about the future of food. There's a lot of provocative things to think about. I just would like to let our audience know that our next CPMA webinar will be on Thursday, March 17th, where we'll have an industry panel which will tackle the complicated issue of supply chain disruptions and offer some solutions. Registration details will be in the next CPMA members bulletin. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you, David and Mark.